back. Here we go. There you go. I appreciate folks staying home when they have the flu. That's very good, particularly in this room, where if you sit in the back and you cough, given the slope of this room, we're all catching it. So hopefully those folks aren't here, and those of you who are here who weren't here last week because you were sick, thank you for acknowledging the negative externalities of your presence and internalizing your externalities. Oh my God, I talk like an economist. All right, so today, I ended very quickly on Thursday talking about industrialization. I want to go back through that a little more slowly. There were a couple points that were important. Then we'll look briefly at population patterns, which then turns us to a nice discussion, I think, of fertility. You have the handout that you received as you walked in. That has tables that cover both today and Thursday. Thank you. Quit. Thank you. What was I going to show you? I was going to show you on the bottom left-hand corner of your handout are listed 4 sources of data for when you do research in economic history. These are also on the course webpage here down in the bottom right-hand corner, down over there. So those are on your handout for today. They're on the bottom right-hand corner of the website, and they show you, well, I'll click on one or two. Let's see. The librarians have put together a page of sources for us, for people who are doing research in economic history. So here's a long set of possible sources that you can use to find data in economic history. They have actually a second page as well that gives you more information. Where was I? There I am. There we go. Economic history, more stuff about economic history there. There are 2 data sources that give you numbers upon numbers upon numbers. The United States economy, back to colonial period, and back to the colonial period. One is the Historical Statistics of the United States that was published in 1976 and covers colonial times to 1970. That was a 2-volume set. It's available online to anybody. You don't have to have a Berkeley ID in order to get to it. It's available through the United States Census, which is the organization that put it together back in the 1970s. At that time, it was a government product because of the positive externalities and the type of funding we had back then. And so you can see that particular document. Oh, we have to go to a pen. No, I don't know how to make this into a pen. Well, I'm going to have to point. So that particular document is here, this bicentennial edition, and these are big files, right? 52 and 66 meg. You can get zip or PDF of that version. And they're actually, what's interesting is you can also get the previous version that was published in about 1947 that has historical statistics through 1945. It's also available there. More recently, a large group of economic historians put together an updated version of historical statistics. This came out in 2006. The census no longer wanted to fund it. They didn't think this was a good use of government money, so now it's funded privately. Cambridge University Press published it. It's $900 for the 5-volume set. It used to be $35 for the 2-volume set. So libraries have it. It's available online through paid access. So you can get to this because you're a UC student, but if you're not a UC Berkeley student, you can't necessarily access this. The school that I was working at last year had not bought access for the historical statistics, for instance. So small little liberal arts colleges don't have access. Big public universities do. And the is now a 5-volume set. Oh, for pity's sake, go away. It's now a 5-volume set. If I was making a purchase, no. Over there, it's a 5-volume set. I'm not going to touch this thing again. Population, work and welfare, economic structure and performance, ABCDE on the lower left-hand side. In section in a few weeks, you'll work with this data set, and then the second problem set, which is due, I don't know when, in about 5 weeks, you're going to work with these data sets for that problem set, and also for your term papers, you're likely to need historical data. So this gives you places to start in terms of finding historical data. Close all tabs. All right. Do I have any questions before we get started on content? What else do I need to remind you? Response papers due Friday via BSpace. Problem set 1 will get distributed Thursday as you walk in. Will also be put on the website. Good to go? All right, let's rock and roll. Early industrialization. First thing you need is your map, so that we can see where the centers of industrialization were in the first part of the 19th century. So here's our USA map. In the early part of the 19th century, so in the early 1800s, one center of manufacturing was near Boston. So I'll just put a big blob on top of it. Eastern Massachusetts, near Boston, that's where the Lowell mills were, where Waltham, Massachusetts is. And so there was a big center of manufacturing in and near Boston, which is in eastern Massachusetts. There was a second center of manufacturing in Rhode Island, which I've now covered up with my pen because I made such a big dot. Rhode Island is that little itty-bitty state that's tucked under the armpit of Massachusetts, or perhaps under the elbow. I'm not quite sure which. I think it's under the armpit of Massachusetts. So Pawtucket and Providence, Rhode Island, are there in New England. And then the third major center of manufacturing in the early 19th century is down here in the basically along this border. So along eastern New Jersey down the Philadelphia border. So a stretch that goes along a river, which made it easy to transport things, that starts at Paterson, New Jersey, which is across the river from New York City, and runs down to Philadelphia. So that's the area that we're talking about. So when we talk about manufacturing, early manufacturing, we're talking about activity that's taking place largely in New England, and not in the depths of New England, but in the parts of New England that are near the ocean transport, and in the eastern mid-Atlantic, so the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. We're not talking about activity in the South. We're not talking about activity in what was then the Northwest, or what we would think of today as the Midwest. Excuse me. The manufacturing activity is taking place largely in New England, southern New England, and the eastern part of the mid-Atlantic. These are out of order. On Thursday, I showed you this slide real quickly, the characteristics of factory production. Lots of standardized output for a wide market. So if you're going to produce in a factory, which is a characteristic of early manufacturing, if you're going to produce in a factory, that means that you're producing lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of the same thing. You're not producing, as boots were produced previous to this, boots were produced person per person. So if Thelma wanted a pair of boots, they would measure her feet and make her a pair of boots. And if Nick wanted a pair of boots, they would measure his feet and make him a pair of boots. That's different than the boot manufacturing company making 300 pairs of boots, black boots size 10 or so. So it was standardized output is a necessary precondition for having a factory. It has to be that people are willing to purchase not a custom made, but a standardized type of output. Got a question? Henry Ford, which is a century later. So Henry Ford had I just lost the word. I thought while you were talking. Assembly line. So the moving assembly line. And with the moving assembly line, the characteristic of the moving assembly line was that instead of people moving to the work could move to the people. So you could have a station. Think about the old I Love Lucy with the chocolates. Did you ever see that one? So you could have a station and the chocolates come by you and you have to put them in a box. As opposed to you have to walk around and pull the chocolates off of the shelves and put them in a box and then go to the next thing. So the difference between what Henry Ford does in the early 20th century and what we have here is the work itself doesn't move along an assembly line. So the worker may have one station, but they're responsible for the activities that take place in front of them at that station, which don't change from moment to moment. So they may be responsible for some sort of textile equipment. It's the same stinking machine every day. So they're always responsible for machine 789, 790, and 791. Okay. Lots of standardized output for a wide market. So they have to be demand conditions where people are willing to purchase the same thing and they don't want to have customized output. Part of having standardized output is also having production that allows for interchangeable parts. I'm never sure if the E goes in there, so I always put it in for good measure, and if it's wrong, take it out. Interchangeable parts means that, well, let me just use an example, that when you are assembling, here we go, when they were assembling this chair down here, there's two screws here that hold the writing tablet onto the arm of the chair. It wasn't that they had to find one particular screw that was made for one particular hole. They had a bin full of about 1,000 of these screws, and they could reach their hand in and grab any two because they were interchangeable. You could use the first screw you grabbed, you could use the third screw you grabbed, you could use the 99th screw that you grabbed. They're interchangeable. They all are going to fit. They're all going to work in the same thing. So interchangeable parts means that the machining has been done so that you don't have to have this screw and this bolt go together. But grab a screw out of this bin, grab a bolt out of that bin, put them together, and they'll fit. So interchangeable parts is also an important part of this factory process in terms of making equipment that can be, a lot of equipment that can be used and repaired easily to keep the production process going. There it is. Complex operations in one or more buildings. The illustration of this I showed you when we were talking about canals. This is a map of the area around Lowell, Massachusetts, where there was lots of textile manufacturing taking place. This map is from 1832, and I think you can see it. I showed you the other day the white lines. I emphasized that those were the canals. Let's not worry about the water right now. Let's worry about what's going on. So here's, I can just choose any of them. Here's the mills, and some of these, like these bluish buildings here, those are boarding houses. So that's where the workers lived. They lived in dormitories that were right there near where they worked. And then there's a series of factories which are right here, and you can see the factories are laid out. They're laid out around the canal, so the canal is going to be used to move heavy things in between one building and another. And then there's other. You can see the other stuff on the map. There's other housing, hotels, churches, and so on. But the big operations, lots of buildings. Here's the Merrimack Mills, includes all of those separate buildings. So these are requiring a large labor force, which is the third characteristic of factory production, which is assembly of workers under an organizational discipline. I showed you the organizational discipline on Thursday. This was the table of the Lowell Mills, the timetable that showed people what times they had to be at various places. So from the 1st to the 10th of January, the first bell was going to ring at 5 in the morning, and the next bell, and the next bell was going to ring at 6 in the morning, and the third bell was going to ring at 6:50 in the morning. Let's see. With the yard gates will be opened at the ringing of the last morning bell. And the mill gates commence, hoisting the mill gates 2 minutes before commencing work. At 10 minutes after the last morning bell, work commences. And then it has the breakfast bells. If you get to work at 7:30, you have breakfast at 8:05 and so on. Dinner bells, and then the evening bells at what time you quit is here 7:30 in January and so on. So it just tells you exactly what time. So and there's a large, loud bell that rings. How do you know the bell's ringing? You're living in the boarding house. You're living nearby. You can hear the bell. It's kind of like the Camp Neely, but not as pretty. It doesn't have the pretty songs 3 times a day. But it tells you when you need to be where. It's not romantic, right? There's no romance to this. It's not like, oh, wow, wouldn't it have been cool to live in 1803? Not if you're a factory worker. If you're a factory worker living in 1803, you're looking at living in a boarding house with a lot of other people doing a pretty boring job day after day at which you have to be to work at a very early hour of the day, and you're going to work for very, very long hours of the day and get paid a small amount. Yep. They did work in summer. Those are ditto marks. So what it means is that they don't move the time any earlier in June, July, August. So the sunlight, the solstice is June 20th. So they figure that 4:30 is the first bell in May. No need to push it any earlier with the moving of the sun to the solstice in June 20th and back towards autumn in September. But yeah, they worked in the summer. All right. Who was doing the work? Largely it was women, at least in the Lowell mills. So one of the arguments is that a lot of these textile mills located in New England precisely because there was a relatively large available labor force of women who were moving off the farms because the farming in New England, remember the long winters of New England, the farming in New England was not very profitable. And so the women in New England had a relatively low opportunity cost to working in textile manufacturing, to working in industry. Because the opportunity cost, remember, definition of opportunity cost is what's the best available use of your time, best alternative use of your time. And for women who are coming in off the farm, their alternative use of their time would be to help the family with farming. But in New England, which has very rocky soil, has a very long winter, does not have very good growing conditions, is relatively far north, and so even the slant of the sun is not terribly helpful big chunks of the year, the opportunity cost of working is relatively low for the women, as opposed to women who are in, for instance, the Mid-Atlantic states. The Mid-Atlantic states have a much longer growing season, have much more fertile land, much less rocky soil, and have not as harsh of a winter. And the opportunity cost for those women of leaving the farm and going into town and working in the factory was much higher. And so the argument is that the factories locate, that there's a nice synergy here, that the factories locate in New England because of the low cost of labor, because the women have a relatively low opportunity cost because the farming is so bad. And then once the factories locate in New England, it provides the women who are on the farms in New England with a place to go to earn money. These are largely unmarried young women who are leaving the farm, going into town, living in the dormitory. So one of the promises to the father was your daughter will be cared for. She's going to be in the dorm. She's not going to be out carousing with the men in downtown Boston because we know where she is. Go in, live in the dormitory, work at the mills, and then you can remit a lot of your earnings back to your family, which is having a hard time making a living farming in rocky, cold, long-wintered New England. Reservation wage is the concept of what's the minimum wage that someone is willing to accept. So reservation wage is essentially taking this concept of your opportunity cost and just giving it a new name. The reservation wage is what is the minimum wage at which you are willing to work. It's not what's the minimum wage that the government requires. Okay? So we're not talking about minimum wage laws. We're talking about for you as an individual, how low are you willing to go? What's the lowest you're willing to accept as pay if you're going to take a job? And if your opportunity cost of working is relatively low because your best alternative use of time is not going to provide you with very much income, you're going to have a relatively low reservation wage. So the women in New England had a much lower reservation wage than did women in the Mid-Atlantic states and then did the men in the New England states who were going to stay and at least have somebody who was working the farm throughout the year. Okay. We get 3 stages of industrialization. The first stage is what I've been describing, 1790 to 1815, the New England textiles. The second stage, there's the fusion of manufacturing throughout the Northeast, 1815 to 1840. And the third stage, which we're not talking about today, 1840 to 1860, which is when there's relatively rapid productivity gains having to do with the development of steam power and other factors, which we are not discussing today. So, but all of these factories and this growth in industrialization requires a labor force. And that does get us to our main topic of today, which is people. So we have an economy in the 19th century, the early 1800s, which is largely agricultural. So all this discussion I just had of industrialization is taking place within an agricultural nation. The United States is an agricultural nation in the 19th century. We are largely farmers. There is industrialization as well. It's a relatively small part of the economy. The United States manufacturing sector is, however, the second largest in the world. So Britain is number 1 and the U.S. is number 2. But still, I want you to keep in mind that this is all within the context of farmers. So we're still an agricultural nation. We have a lot of farming yet to discuss. Sam. Northeast here is the Mid-Atlantic and New England. That combination of both the Mid-Atlantic and New England. Yeah, moving away from the coast because of the improvements in transportation, which we'll talk about another day. So I talk first about population patterns, and that's mostly just to look at some data, and then we're going to talk about models of fertility. So that's the big topics for today. Oh, and there's a chart. Oh, well, I'll show you the chart first. So what do I have? On the left, I have 1810. 1810. On the right, I have 1840. And here's a chart that shows you. And this is looking at the diffusion of cotton spinning between 1810 and 1840. The larger the dot, the more cotton spinning spindles there are. And you can see there's more big dots, and there's a further move inward or westward of the cotton spinning. So and here's a graphical representation of the answer to your question. So the diffusion in the northeast, there's both more where there had been spinning before, and it's also migrating throughout the area. There's also a little bit of cotton spinning here in the south. A lot of cotton, however, is exported to the north and then spun into cloth in the north. All right, now on to population question. How competitive is American versus British cotton textile manufacturing? My memory tells me relatively very much. How's that for a terrible answer? That American cotton manufacturing is quite competitive. The growth of cotton in the rest of the world comes later. So Indian cotton is going to compete with American cotton, but not until the late 1800s. And so America is the source of a large share, I don't know what share, of the cotton manufacturing in the antebellum period. It's an important part of the United States economy, and it's an important part of the world economy. So, all right. Population. So from the charts for today, table 1 just shows you the amount of population. The population is growing from 1790 on through this period, which ends 1860. The population today is about 315 million for comparison's sake. We have population growth during this antebellum period about 3% per year. So the population is growing quite rapidly. Today the population grows about 1% per year. So we have about 1%, 1.2% population growth today. In the antebellum period, the population was growing very rapidly, about 3% per year. Remember your rule of 72 that you might have learned in Econ 100B. With a 3% growth rate, population will double in 72 over 3 would be 24 years. With a 1% growth rate, population would double in 72 over 1 would be 72 years. So 3% is a big difference than 1%. 3% population growth, the population is overwhelmingly rural. So backing up what I was saying about manufacturing being a small share, 1790, 95% of the population is rural. By 1860, the end of the period we're concerned with before the first midterm, we still have 80% of the population of the United States is rural. So we're overwhelmingly an agricultural, rural nation throughout this antebellum period. The share of the population non-white, so we're going from the census records, and the census records in this period would ask white or non-white. They didn't have any disaggregation of the category non-white. 18% in 1790. And that peaks at a little bit higher in 1820 and then is down to 14.5% by 1860. On another day, we'll talk about slavery. One of the issues here is the ending of the importation of slaves. So with the ending of the importation of slaves, then the growth of the non-white population, which in this period is almost all African-American, not all of which is enslaved, but the vast majority of which is enslaved, and the growth of that population in the period of importation, so that ends in 1808, includes the importation of slaves. Post-1808, this is going to be due to birth versus death. Sam? Yes, Irish immigration. We're going to talk about immigration on Thursday. The Irish wave is 1840s. No, the Irish are included in the white category. So any British subjects are white. Well, not all, but yes, they're white. It's almost all African and African descent. Okay. Sources of population growth. In general, population can grow for two reasons. One is natural increase. So one source of increase in population is what demographers call natural increase. And natural increase comes about through the interaction of fertility, which refers to births, nuptiality, which refers to marriages, and mortality, which refers to deaths. So all else constant, if people having more babies, the population is going to grow faster. There's going to be larger natural increase. If they're having fewer babies, the population will grow slower. There'll be a smaller natural increase. All else constant, if marriage is earlier or if a larger share of your population is getting married, marriage tends to, in the old days, used to be love and marriage, and then came the baby carriage. It's in the old days. Anyway. And so if marriage is earlier or if a greater share of the population is getting married, that tends to increase the number of children that are going to be born over the course of the lifetime of the woman, and that's going to give you a natural increase in population. And mortality, which is deaths, the higher the mortality rate, then the smaller the natural increase in population, the lower the mortality rate, the higher the natural increase in population. Changes in mortality, we're really going to talk about changes in mortality when we talk about the 20th century. So changes in mortality are not a part of the story for the 19th century. The story for the 19th century is a change in fertility. From the work that we'll look at today, we don't know if those changes in fertility are happening within marriage or through marriage being postponed. So we're going to look, the piece we're going to look at today is going to look at fertility, although we may be looking at both fertility and nuptiality at the same time without really knowing if that's what we're doing. The second source of population growth is immigration. Immigration we talk about on Thursday. So we'll come back and talk about immigration, patterns of immigrations, and what are the factors that lead to rising and falling immigration, and we'll talk about that on Thursday. Okay. So today's topic, we're going to focus largely on fertility. And we're going to get to the David and Sundstrom article, which you're working with in section this week and Monday, or last Monday. You already did Monday? Yeah, yesterday. Okay, this week. So the David and Sundstrom article that you're working with in section this week is where we're going to end up by the end of the day. So let's look at some of the data. When we look at fertility today in 2013, we have a number of different ways of measuring how high fertility is. That is, how high is the number of births. When we're looking at historical data, we're more limited. We can't go back and survey people who are long since dead. And so when we're looking at fertility data for, say, 1800 and 1840, we're pretty much limited to the data that are available in the census. And the data that are available in the census don't ask women how many births have you had. They don't ask how many live births are there. They go household by household, and they want to know who's living in the household and how old they are. And sometimes they ask, what's the relationship? Is this your son or